During Thanksgiving dinner at my son-in-law's family mansion, his father threw a glass of red wine in my daughter's face. His son laughed and said, "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that'll teach her some respect." I felt my hands grip the armrest of my chair. I stood up, excused myself, and walked to the hallway. I pulled out my phone and made a single call. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Before we continue, please subscribe to Revenge with Shawn and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I hadn't seen my girl in 4 months when the invitation came, not from her, but from her husband's assistant, a formal card on heavy, expensive paper. The Peaton family requests your presence at Thanksgiving dinner. November 23rd, 5 p.m. sharp. No warmth, no. We'd love to see you, Dad. Just a summons, like I was being called to appear before royalty. I'm 62 years old. I live in a small house in Tempe, Arizona, with a yard I tend myself and a 20-year-old truck in the driveway. My neighbors probably think I'm just another retired working man living on a modest pension. They're not wrong exactly. I did retire, and my pension is modest, but there's more to the story. A much longer story. And until that Thanksgiving, I'd kept every single chapter of it locked away. The Peaton estate sits in Paradise Valley, one of those gated communities where the houses have names instead of numbers. Whispering Pines. I drove up the long driveway on that Thursday afternoon, past manicured gardens and a fountain that probably cost more than my entire house. The mansion itself was all glass and stone, the kind of place designed to make you feel small. He answered the door. My son-in-law, tall with that polished look money buys, he wore a sweater that felt like a soft insult. "You made it," he said, smiling that empty, perfect smile. "Not Dad, never Dad. Just my name," said like he was checking an item off a list. "Wouldn't miss it," said, though we both knew I'd missed quite a bit lately. Not by choice. My daughter appeared behind him. My heart cracked a little. She'd lost weight. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind that don't come from just being tired. Her smile when she saw me was real, but it flickered and died too fast, like a light someone was afraid to leave on. "Hi, Dad." She hugged me quickly, and I felt it, the bones in her back, the tension in her shoulders. She used to be strong, my girl. Now she felt like a held breath. The house was a museum of cold wealth, vaulted ceilings, paintings that were all sharp lines and angry colors, furniture so white you were afraid to sit on it. He held court in the great room. The father. He didn't just sit in a chair. He occupied a throne. Mid-50s, silver hair, a suit on a holiday. He was on his phone, barking orders. When he saw me, he didn't stand. "The blue-collar legend arrives. Good of you to join us." He said it with a grin. But the label blue-collar was a weapon. Years ago, I'd mentioned working construction to put myself through school. He'd been sharpening that detail ever since. Dinner was a performance, a chandelier that scattered cold light, china so thin I thought it might break from the weight of the silence. He poured the wine like he was unveiling a holy relic. "A 2015 Bordeaux," he announced. "The bottle costs more than some people's weekly groceries." He looked right at me. "Do you know anything about wine?" "I know what I like," I said, keeping my voice even. "A beer man," he declared, laughing. "Simple tastes for simple lives. Nothing wrong with that." His son, my daughter's husband, chuckled along. My daughter stared at her plate, her knuckles white around her fork. The conversation was a minefield. Every topic was a chance for him to boast, to belittle. He talked about mergers, about stock portfolios, about buying a new boat. He asked me about my hobbies, his tone suggesting he expected me to say whittling or watching NASCAR. Then he turned to my daughter. She had been quiet all night, speaking only when spoken to. "So," he said, swirling his wine, "my son tells me you're still dabbling with those computer designs, turning that into a real career yet?" My daughter lifted her head. I saw a flash of the fire, I remembered. "It is a real career. I've been building a client list." "A client list," he repeated, smirking. "Selling logos to Etsy shops and Instagram moms. That's not a career, sweetheart. That's a distraction. A real contribution would be focusing on your family, on providing an heir." He glanced at his son. "But I suppose that's not a priority yet either." The heir left the room. My daughter's face went pale. Her husband shifted in his seat, looking at his father, not at his wife. "My work is important to me," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Important?" He set his glass down with a sharp clink. "Let me tell you what's important. Legacy, name, substance. You married into this family, but you seem determined to cling to your modest beginnings. You embarrass my son at charity galas because you don't know which fork to use. You talk about things no one cares about. You lack the polish this name requires." I could see her crumbling. A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. "Don't cry," the father scoffed. "Emotion is a weakness, a manipulation. You think those tears work on me? They just prove my point." And then it happened. She stood up. Her chair screeched against the marble floor. "I will not be spoken to like this," she whispered, her voice full of a shattered kind of courage. For a second, there was silence. Then, a red, furious flush climbed the father's neck. He stood up too. He picked up his nearly full glass of deep blood-red wine. "You will sit down," he said, his voice dangerously low, "and you will learn your place. In this house, under my roof, you show respect." She didn't move. She just looked at him, defiance and despair warring in her eyes. He threw the wine. It wasn't a splash. It was a full, furious throw. The glass hit her chest, but the contents flew up, arcing through the air and splashing across her face, her hair, her white blouse. She gasped, stumbling back, the red liquid looking horrific like a wound. Time stopped. Then a laugh, a cold, cruel chuckle. It came from her husband. He shook his head, a smile on his lips. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "Maybe that'll teach her some respect." Something in me broke, not with a scream, but with a silence so profound it was deafening. I felt my hands grip the armrests of my chair so hard the wood groaned. I saw my daughter, my beautiful, strong girl, standing there humiliated, stained, betrayed by the man who vowed to love her. I saw the smug triumph on the father's face, the pathetic approval on the son's. I stood up. Every eye turned to me. I smoothed my napkin, placed it neatly on the table. "If you'll all excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice strangely calm, flat. "I need to make a phone call." I walked out of the dining room, my steps measured. I could feel their stares on my back, confused, dismissive. The old man needs a moment, they were thinking. He's upset. He's going to call a friend to complain. They had no idea. The hallway was lined with portraits of stern-looking Petons. I walked past them, down a corridor, and into a lavishly appointed bathroom. I locked the door. I looked at myself in the gold-framed mirror, the face of a retired man. A simple man. A harmless man. I pulled out my phone, not the latest model, scratched, ordinary. I dialed a number from memory, a number I hadn't called in over a decade, a number that connected to a different world, a different life. It rang once, twice. A voice answered, neutral, professional. Verification. I spoke a series of numbers and a code word, a name that hadn't belonged to me for a very long time. The voice on the other end didn't miss a beat. Asset status confirmed. What is the requirement? My voice was no longer that of a quiet father from Tempe. It was clipped, clear, and cold. Target: Richard Peton, CEO of Peton Holdings. Secondary: David Peton. Immediate full-spectrum financial and reputational audit. Authorized package: Quiet Sunset. I want everything, every shell company, every offshore account, every hidden loan, every silenced whistleblower. And I want his son's company, Venture Crest, peeled open. Find the pressure points, then apply it. Maximum pressure. Time frame? Now. Acknowledged. Assets are moving. Estimated initial collapse, 72 hours. Make it 48, I said, and ended the call. I took a deep breath, watching the man in the mirror become Frank Morrison again. The janitor. The blue-collar legend. The harmless dad. But for 35 years, I wasn't Frank Morrison. I was a ghost in the machine, an analyst, and later a strategist for a shadowy division of the government that didn't exist on paper. My job was to understand systems, financial systems, security systems, corporate systems, and find the single thread that, when pulled, would make the whole sweater unravel. I was the man nations called when they wanted a corrupt oligarch to fall on hard, natural-looking times. I retired with a new name, a modest pension, and a promise to never look back. Until tonight. I washed my hands in the gold-plated sink, dried them on a monogrammed towel. I walked back to the dining room. They were still at the table. My daughter was gone, likely upstairs cleaning up. The father was pouring another drink, holding court again. He saw me and smirked. "Everything all right, Frank? Phone bill too high this month?" I took my seat. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a powerful man. I saw a structure, and I had just removed its foundation. "Everything's perfect," I said quietly. The first sign came before the dessert was served. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. He glanced at it, annoyed, then his expression shifted. Confusion, then concern. He stood up. "I have to take this." He left the room. My son-in-law's phone buzzed a moment later. He looked at it, frowned, and followed his father. I sat alone at the massive table. I finished my water. I could hear raised voices from the study down the hall. Panicked, sharp. My daughter came back down. She'd changed her shirt. Her eyes were red but dry. She sat beside me, her hand finding mine under the table. She held on tight. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she whispered. "No," I said, squeezing her hand. "The night is just beginning." Over the next hour, the house descended into chaos. The father stormed back in, face ashen. "What did you do?" he hissed. At me, but he was already distracted, yelling into his phone. "What do you mean the credit lines are frozen? Call the bank chairman. No, I don't care what time it is in Zurich." His son ran in, holding a tablet, his face a mask of horror. "Dad, the VentureCrest website. It's been replaced. There's just a list. All our investors, their private contact info, and all our financial projections, the real ones, next to the fake ones we showed them. It's being blasted to every news outlet." The father's phone rang. He answered, and I could hear the tinny scream of an angry voice from the earpiece. It was his biggest investor. Then another call. A board member. The house of cards was trembling. By midnight, the news channels were picking up the story. Financial titan under siege. Allegations of fraud rock Peyton Empire. They huddled in the study, blinds drawn, making desperate calls that went unanswered. I walked my daughter to the foyer. "Pack a bag," I told her. "You're coming home with me." She looked at the study, then at me, a dawning understanding in her eyes. "Dad? How?" "I told you," I said, opening the front door to the cool night air. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in collapse. It was all public, legal, and utterly devastating. Quiet Sunset was a protocol designed not for illegal hacking, but for leveraging truth. Every hidden secret Richard Peyton had buried, the bribes to inspectors, the stolen patents from small inventors, the environmental violations he'd paid to hide, the predatory loans his son's company was built on, was unearthed by anonymous whistleblowers and delivered directly to regulators, journalists, and his competitors. His assets were frozen, his partners fled. His empire, built on arrogance and lies, crumbled to dust in a matter of days. A week later, my daughter was staying with me, starting to smile again, the color returning to her cheeks. We were sitting on my porch when a beat-up sedan pulled up. Not a luxury car. David got out. He looked hollow. The polish was gone. He walked up, hands in his pockets. "Sarah, Frank." My daughter stood, her posture straight. "What do you want?" I need to talk to you." His voice was broken. "Everything's gone. The house, the cars. The lawyers say bankruptcy is inevitable. My father, he had a heart attack last night. He's in the hospital. The stress, they say." I stayed quiet, watching. "I was wrong," he said, the words clearly foreign in his mouth. "I was so wrong. About everything. About you. I need you. Come back. We can start over without my father." My daughter looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "You didn't love me. You loved the idea of having someone to look down on, to make yourself feel bigger. You laughed when he broke me. There is no we to start over. Goodbye, David." He stood there, shattered. Then he looked at me, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "This was you, wasn't it? What are you? Some kind of secret agent?" I took a sip of my iced tea. "I'm a father," I said. "That's always been enough." He left. a ghost of the man he pretended to be. Here's the truth they never understood, the twist that isn't about secret identities or hidden power. The real twist is about value. They measured worth in bottles of wine, square footage, and stock tickers. They thought my value was low because my truck was old and my hands were rough. They thought my daughter's value was negotiable, something to be polished or discarded. But real value, real power, isn't in what you can buy. It's in what you can build. It's in the quiet strength of a promise kept for decades. It's in the love for your child that turns a peaceful man into an unstoppable force. It's in the ahab truth, which, once unleashed, is more destructive than any lie. My power wasn't that I had a secret phone number. My power was that I had spent a lifetime building a character of integrity, which meant, when I called, people who valued truth and justice answered. Their weakness wasn't a lack of money in the end. It was the mountain of lies their money was built on. My daughter started her own design firm. It's thriving. She uses her talent to help small businesses, real people with real dreams. She's laughing again. As for me, I'm back to tending my garden in Tempe, driving my old truck. But the story has a final footnote. Last month, a plain envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a single color photograph. It showed Richard Peaton out of the hospital, sitting on a park bench somewhere, looking old and tired. On the back, typed, were 3 words: Quiet Sunset Achieved. I burned the photograph in my backyard grill. I watched the ashes rise and vanish into the Arizona sky. The lesson is this: be careful who you disrespect. The quiet man in the corner might just be the most dangerous person in the room, not because of what he carries in his pocket, but because of what he carries in his heart. And a father's love, when provoked, is the most powerful and most silent force on earth. If you felt the heat of that justice, hit like and subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done? And remember, sometimes the most ordinary people are guarding the most extraordinary secrets. Until next time.